Good evening, and thank you for coming by and watching this video again. I appreciate the time you're taking to stay informed about COVID-19. I'm doing this sort of what I think will be a quick weekend review. I know the audio for my presentations isn't great. I've ordered a microphone so that they'll be better, hopefully in a few days. But I wanted to just bring us back to some headlines of the previous week. So this is a week ago Friday. It's now Friday night here. A week ago Friday, we started being very concerned that the U.S. was going to run out of hospital beds for the coronavirus cases as the cases start to build momentum and will eventually spike. I think that's still very much in the news. Washington state schools shut down amid virus worry. We're no longer shutting down schools. We're shutting down entire states. California is in a state of lockdown. New York is in a lockdown, and it's going to keep, I think, getting more extreme. It seems funny to think of Disneyland was open till about a week ago. That's a different world than we live in now. Broadway was open till about a week ago. And again, as I said, we now, I think, take things very seriously. Half of U.S. hotels could close because of lack of travel. The Olympics are very much in doubt. What does shelter in place really mean? What can stay open? Are you allowed to be on the roads? There's a lot of questions about that. Right now, a shelter in place is a fairly voluntary and mild-mannered, friendly thing, and I think we may have to get much more serious and actually enforce it in a much more significant way. Trump, of course, is referring to this as the China virus and is trying to blame China and deflect criticism from himself or from his government for bungling the response to COVID-19 and the U.S. bungled the response to COVID-19. We had warning. We saw Italy start to happen. We saw China happen. We should have been much further along. This is today's situation report from the World Health Organization. It looks like you're seeing exponential growth here, and that's sort of true, but also sort of not true. This is not the cumulative number of cases. This is the raw number of cases each day. So the scale here is 4,000, 8,000, 12,000. We're now adding 20,000 cases a day. So during the entire outbreak in China, it was about 80,000 cases. We're adding 20,000 cases a day. So in 4 days, we've got enough cases to match what happened in China over the first 6 or 8 or 10 weeks of this epidemic. Europe is definitely the epicenter of this pandemic right now, but the region of the Americas, particularly the United States, this is not a Canadian thing yet. I mean, they have cases and they're growing, but right now the real enormous growth is happening in the U.S. And I have it as a yellow arrow because it's not quite as severe as what we're seeing in Europe, but it's on its way. So the week in review, I clipped these Johns Hopkins dashboard pictures every day and save them. I did this just so you know. I started this weeks ago because I teach biostatistics, and I thought, wow, someday this is going to be a great example, and I'm going to actually have the data and the messaging and the analyses that were done during the first days of the epidemic, and we can look at how close we got it. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? This is just going to be awesome. I did that with Ebola. I did that with H1N1, and each of those became very important health challenges that were surmounted, and then they became great teaching examples. And I didn't realize when I started this that this was going to become such an obsession for me, unfortunately, but also it's a terrible tragedy and challenge for the world. So this is the 13th, a week ago Friday, Tuesday, today. This is the number of confirmed cases cumulatively. So we've gone from 137 to 258. That's a difference of 121,000 new cases. So if we had 121,000 cases last week, shouldn't we expect to add another 121,000 cases this week? And that means we would have about 380,000 cases next week at this time. That sounds absolutely horrible, but it's actually an underestimate. It's not true. Epidemics don't grow additively; they grow multiplicatively. There's this exponential rate. So what you really have to look at is the proportion change. You do a ratio of the two numbers, you get at 1.88. That means we've got 88% growth. So each week now we should expect to add 88% more cases. So if we take the 258 and we multiply by 1.88, that's this number plus the 88%, we get something very close to 500,000 cases. So at the current trajectory, in 7, 8 days, something like that, we should be looking at almost 500,000 cases. I haven't talked much about fatalities. It's very sad. It's tragic, of course. But the story has been cases, but the story is switching, I think, very quickly to overwhelming our medical systems and the virulence of this novel coronavirus. So a week ago, we had 5,000 worldwide cases cumulatively. Today, 11,000. That is more than a twofold increase. So we've added 121% new cases. So I would think by about next week at this time, another 121% new cases. We should add another 14-ish or 13,000-ish new cases. We should be very close to 25,000 deaths at this point. Now, 25,000 deaths out of 500,000 is about 5%. So we're looking at an apparent case fatality ratio of 5%. There's lots of issues about calculating case fatality ratios from these incomplete numbers because of undercounting of cases and time lags before sickness sets in and so forth. But I just wanted to put it out there that our first ideas about the case fatality ratios of 1.5%, 2%, because it was mostly mild and mostly the elderly that succumbed to this, that doesn't appear to be holding true in Europe and in the States. It seems to be much worse than that. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on an accurate estimate of the case fatality ratio, but it's brutal. So what are our milestones? Next weekend, 8 or 9 days from now, I think the world will pass 500,000. I think we'll be adding 40,000 cases daily at that point, which means we can add in enough cases to look like the entire Chinese portion of this epidemic in 2 days instead of taking 4 days. I think we'll have 25,000 fatalities, as I pointed out, and we'll be adding thousands per day, not hundreds per day, 2,000 per day, I think. And the United States will be growing quickly to become a second epicenter of the pandemic. It won't catch up to Europe in a week's time. It's growing faster than the epidemic in Europe. I think we'll have about 200,000 cases in the States next weekend. If things continue as they are, and I think they won't. We're changing our behavior. I think there's already some evidence that things are starting to slow down, and Italy may peak soon. We won't get into that just yet. But so we're not just going to let this go on forever without doing anything. So I'm not sure this will come to pass. But if we were to keep the same growth rate that we observed this last week, the U.S. would have more cases than Europe in about April 10th. So that's about 3 weeks away-ish. So that's how fast the U.S. is growing and will be a very important center of this pandemic. And I should also point out that part of why we think of Europe and the U.S. as epicenters is because they are. But part of it is because we don't have good information from a couple of very important continents. We don't have good surveillance systems in Africa. We don't have good surveillance systems in parts of Southeast Asia, in parts of South America. I think we are going to see the same kind of explosive, destructive, deadly growth of this virus in those areas, and it won't be in the news as much because we won't have good numbers and we won't have as many cameras there. But it's happening, and let's just remember that, because this is not a Western problem or a Chinese problem or a European problem. This is a global problem that we all have to figure out a way to try to face. So I started this around 4 p.m. and then I took a break and did some shelter-in-place kind of things, had dinner with my family and watched a movie and things. During that 7 hours before I came back up here and recorded this, the world recorded 17,000 more new cases and another 130 new fatalities, just in a few hours. And I wanted to say thank you. I started, as I said earlier, doing this just because I thought it'd be a great teaching example, and now it's something far, far, far worse and far more important. It's literally our lives that we're looking after. So I appreciate anybody taking time to listen to my videos. I'm one of thousands of talking heads out there that are talking about what we think is going on with this disease. I think I'm doing a credible job with the data, and I'm showing you my thought process and the raw data so you can make informed decisions, and I hope you find that useful.